At a major Hollywood studio, in a corner office of Sub-Basement D, the development executives toil in obscurity to reboot it.
Gentlemen, Merry Christmas, and we are back to reboot movies that we don't ever want to see rebooted.
That's right.
We are living in the golden age of the franchise IP, so whether we want it or not, the great movies of the past will get reboots. We're here to try to do it right and to show people that we're not just pretty faces, we're beautiful minds.
I saw Ron just writing on the wall as I was coming in and chalk, so I definitely think he's ready.
He's picking up more yarn every week just to add. So let's quick introductions. To my left, the man that you know from Hot Takes with Billy Business, the hottest takes in the biz, and a senior producer at Screen Junkies, Billy Business.
I'm excited for today's because it actually was my Nerd Goat episode.
It was your Nerd Goat. You have a deep abiding love for Indiana Jones. Speaking of Nerd Goat, on the other side of the table, the dynamic duo, Ed Greer, Ron Swallow, co-hosts of the Nerd Goat podcast.
That's right. We're pretty excited about this one. A little nervous, actually.
Well, I mean, I think this is just one of the ones where, you know, we got to be careful. We love this so much, but we have to have the detached eye of the rebooters.
Yeah.
That's
the new CBS procedural drama, The Rebooters.
That's it. And I am producer Bill from the Nerd Goat podcast, running the show as best I can here while these guys throw out the golden ideas. So let's just get into it, guys. Indiana Jones, one of the most beloved geek franchises of all time, George Lucas's other franchise, in which he teamed up with Steven Spielberg to tell another pulp story going back to the days of archaeology adventure. Indiana Jones is a professor who goes out into the world to discover artifacts, bring them back to be put in a museum. There was, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark kicked off the franchise. They were literally searching for the Lost Ark of the Covenant. We then had a prequel in the form of Temple of Doom, telling some of Indiana Jones's backstory. I guess finding cursed stones in an Indian village. It's all pretty racist. And then,
Sounds all right.
And then finally, the last one brings us all the way back. We meet Indiana Jones's father in the form of the great Sean Connery for the Last Crusade, where they are after the Holy Grail. Now, of course, all these movies were set during World War II. The time period was very much a piece of the story. And so maybe that's the first place to start.
Are we just completely ignoring Crystal Skull? It never happened.
Oh, did that not happen? No, there is a fourth one. It was set in the 1950s. This is with older Indiana Jones and a young Shia LaBeouf as Indiana Jones' son.
And the toughest refrigerator of all time.
And a refrigerator that can withstand a nuclear blast. I have to say I didn't mind that scene.
Yeah, I don't care.
But yeah, that one kind of broke the mold a little bit in so much as Indiana Jones, I guess it was still a quasi-religious artifact he was after, but the big reveal at the end was that aliens exist and they are all the things that ancient alien theorists tell you about the Mayans is true.
Yeah, and I actually like Crystal Skull. I know a lot of people don't, but I do think that is a good barometer of what the people will and won't accept in an Indiana Jones movie. And I just think aliens might just be too far into fantasy land.
Yeah, a magic box burning your face off. Totally cool.
Well, yeah,
Totally cool.
everything
Aliens,
that Indiana
not
Jones
so much.
usually looks for is... It's never really about that. That's why they call it the MacGuffin. It's just something they're searching so we can learn more about Indiana Jones. And I just don't think the aliens did it, you know?
Yeah, that is a good point. And I do think that given we're trying to reboot this franchise, they kind of were going for a soft reboot with Crystal Skull. It is instructive to look at because as much as you might like it, it did not really work well as far as box office and fan reaction.
It did fine.
Well, and as far as that goes, I think it's one of those things where I think that's the difference between religious, mythology. That's the difference between mythology and science fiction. You know what I mean? It shows us the stark difference because people sort of rejected the ancient aliens aspect, but they'll go Ark of the Covenant. They'll go a chalice that heals you. They'll go magic rocks that bring the crops back. They'll go for that because it enhances our appreciation of our world and what's going on here on Earth, rather than the extraterrestrial jazz of the skulls.
Yeah, it's weird. There was something about that fourth one where they really were trying to put together two great tastes that don't taste great together. You know what I mean? It was a little bit like peanut butter and Skittles. Yeah, no, exactly. Because, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that archaeology adventure being a real thing came from a time and a place where, like, as a culture, we thought, oh, we might pull the secrets of the universe out of the ground.
Yes.
And then by the time you get to the sci-fi 50s, nobody actually thought that anymore. When we were worried about aliens, we were looking at the stars and thinking about, like, what's out there rather than what's here. Where's the power buried deep in the earth? I don't know. To me, there's a distinction there.
There's some cool ideas in there that I think that we can definitely use when we're rebooting. I think the idea of misinterpretation of what these items are was a big part of Crystal Skull, which was Aztec, the lost city of gold, which was actually, to the translation of gold, is actually knowledge. They wanted knowledge. And I think that played a part. And even though, like, you know, for most people it didn't work, I do think, again, Indiana Jones at its best is when it sheds light on Indy and the people around him rather than, you know, really digging into the supernatural. It's there, but when you focus on that more than Indy himself is where you start to get a little lost.
I could see that. I mean, so let's get into the first question we always ask. What does an audience need from an Indiana Jones movie? What makes a good Indiana Jones movie? I'll jump in and say, I think one of the core tenets of Indiana Jones is that, and I will say this, I don't know if we want to use Harrison Ford or not. That might be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
But he's always a guy who's in completely over his head. And so whatever the MacGuffin is, whatever the historical event is that we're going to be investigating, like, it does need to be big.
Yes.
Or whoever's going after it needs to want it real bad.
When you think of the two Indiana Jones movies that hit the most, which is Raiders and Last Crusade, the MacGuffins themselves are things that have been in the pop culture zeitgeist, or at least the cultural zeitgeist, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant. You know what that is. And I think with Crystal Skull and with Temple of Doom with those stones, no one really knew what those were. So I do think that for me, although I don't want the MacGuffin to be the main point, I do think that it needs to be something that we all instantly are like, oh yeah, that, you know?
I would agree with that. I don't know, Ron, Ed?
Well, I think it's one of those things, though. It's like that's going to be our challenge. Is there we're running out of, like, a lot of the MacGuffins are in museums. Ironically enough, like, you know, you think about like Shroud of Turin. I know where that is.
Yeah.
I know I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's why I was trying to rack my brain. And I think for me, where Indiana Jones at its best is something that has some historical context, but also has enough, like, is that real? So I'm thinking more along the lines of like Noah's Ark or Excalibur, things that are like,
I will,
maybe, but maybe not.
I had the same thoughts. I have one problem with Excalibur, and that's that then you start involving Arthurian legend, and we cannot have any more movies with Arthurian legend. Just my choice.
I mean, from a producer standpoint, Arthur is not.
That flops
It
hard.
flops every time.
Flops hard.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and how producer-y of you to be the voice of
Hey,
pragmatism?
you know what? That's a great point.
It's pretty rare, but I do like the idea of Noah's Ark, or
Or like
maybe
the Ten
something,
Commandments.
or something along those lines where, I mean, Noah's Ark is huge, so you know, or is it?
But again, that's where you can play into the Crystal Skull. Like, was Noah's Ark metaphorical? And then you can kind of touch even a little bit on religion itself. Like, are these parables? Was it real?
I wonder, though, do we need to get into the minutia of the MacGuffin? Because that's the thing that I don't think Raiders or Last Crusade really does.
No, I don't think you need to get into the minutia, but it does kind of set the table for if it's, if it's Jimmy Hoffa we're looking for, we're never leaving the States and it's not a jet-setting adventure.
Well, also one thing. On a proper Indiana Jones, you have to have some power getting the artifact, and then they become too powerful for everybody. And that's why Indiana Jones is struggling so hard. He doesn't just want to put it in a museum. He wants to get it away from literal Nazis.
No, that's a fair point.
You know what I mean?
I mean, to me, that gets into a really pointed question. Are we setting this in the 1930s or 40s? And if so, are we brooming Harrison Ford by the wayside completely?
I say no.
You say no.
No. I say we do it modern times. and just have new modern Nazis who are trying to get an artifact to bring back the power of the Nazis.
I think for me, what makes Indiana Jones so timeless is that it is set in a time that I can't quite relate to, but I understand the iconography of it.
But yeah,
I agree with that.
Also, I just imagine I was one of the, I guess, 10 people who really liked Kong Skull Island. Okay. And let me tell you something, Mean Gene, that works because it's in the past. It's in an unknowable time. And again, what we're bumping up against when we try to drag it into even the 50s is there is a unrelatability to the pre everything being connected. The 50s are like internet age compared to the 1910s or the 1890s. You know what I mean? It's that far apart from the world being so connected and so small.
I think the other part that makes Raiders and Last Crusade work is that it's not only set in sort of like that far away iconic era, but it's going to pieces of the era that you don't normally hear about. Right. Like it's during World War II, but they're in the Arab world. And so I get that World War II is going on and the Nazis want to rule the world. I get that setup, but it's still exotic. It's not like we're in World War II France that we've seen in 1,000 movies.
Right, and smartly they do it where it's even before like the United States involvement in the war. So it's like this period of time that you're right, we don't really visit. I'm going to be the bold one at the table and say I think you take Harrison out of this at this point.
I'm leaning that way.
I think you have to just because the challenge is that we're rebooting it.
Right.
Like, you know.
Yeah.
We and I also now that I'm thinking about the challenge, I actually think I agree with you guys that we should make it in the 30s or the 40s because it does create that timelessness. And wherever we go, we can kind of work within that realm. Right. And it also limits your ability to find things. So, like, he can't pull out his GPS.
Exactly.
He can't use a satellite that he hacks into to find whatever.
So, well, maybe we can key on some sort of. I just love he's involved tertiarily in these conflicts, like major world conflicts are going on around his singular quest for something. I think that's another thing that audiences almost like require. So what are we?
I believe.
What sort of skirmish are we talking about where he would be on the periphery of? What's an interesting thing, historical conflict before maybe, because like World War I, how far that was like in the 18s, right?
Here's the thing that's interesting about World War I, if we are going to just completely blue sky this. World War I was pretty much the exact same time period where like paleontology was blowing up. So it was like this explosion in finding dinosaur bones and new species of dinosaurs and really painting the picture of dinosaurs as we know it today. That started in the 19-teens, kind of concurrent with World War I. That said, I think if we're talking about get rid of Harrison Ford, totally new continuity, we could also just go back to World War II. I don't know if that plays for everybody or not.
The thing that also makes World War II kind of era interesting is, you know, it gives you a very easy identifiable bad guy. And if we are still riffing on the idea of like those, you know, 1940s serials, I think you have to like, you know, you can't be as nuanced. I think that's what makes Indiana Jones great is that it's not at all. It's a series of cliffhangers that happens to there's 12 third acts in Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, and that's what makes it fun.
And on top of that, the Nazis were well known to be like, or at least Hitler was well known to be looking into occult shit.
Yeah, I mean, the one that jumps out at me, if we're going to go back to the MacGuffin, is the Spear of Destiny, which I know has played a big role in comics as being like this artifact of great power. And I know that it was something that was linked to Hitler throughout the years. That said, like, I am the guy at the table who thinks that World War II is super overplayed. But then again, it becomes a question of like, all right, where in the world can we go during World War II that hasn't been explored geographically? Right. So maybe that's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah. And again, I think that all just depends on what it is that we're looking for. Unless, you know, part of the Indiana Jones too is he's hopping all over the place collecting clues to ultimately get him to where he's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I'll just say it, like, I would love to see Indiana Jones either in sub-Saharan Africa or China. Like, let's bring him to a part of the world that he really hasn't spent much time in these movies. I know he was in India in Temple of Doom, but that was also sort of a racist caricature of India. and it was just the one kind of city or village or whatever it was there near the temple.
I also just like the idea, and this could even just be your cold open because it always starts with something that's not related to the movie. I just want to see Indiana Jones in like a Hoth type snow situation. We always see him in jungle, always in heat,
fair point.
a heated area.
Sweating.
I want to see him just.
You know what you're
bundled
describing?
up.
You're describing the opening to National Treasure with Nicolas Cage.
I mean, they did it right.
They did.
The National Treasures are good movies, man.
National Treasure movies are great, but I also think that that's another argument for avoiding the modern day because they kind of did the Indiana shtick in the modern day, the Indiana Jones shtick. So, are we all set on World War II? And if not, why not? I guess that would be the question to ask the table.
I think if you want to capture the audience who, and honestly, I think maybe that's another reason why Crystal Skull just didn't hit. I think we've so closely associated Indiana Jones with this one kind of period in time. And yeah, World War II can be played out, but also there's a lot of aspects around it that are not played out, you know, especially if World War II is just a backdrop.
Fair point. You guys, thoughts?
I don't think Indy's like storming D-Day.
No, for sure. I think No, and I think that. But I mean, that's consistent with his character, right? He's a college professor, so there's no reason for him to be anywhere near the actual war.
And he's old enough as a character to not like you're not asking 40-year-olds to go fight very often, and even in World War II.
Although Crystal Skull somehow sets up that he was like a big shot spy in the war. So.
Oh. God, see, I don't remember enough of that movie.
Yeah. That's where he met the guy that like quadruple
We're rebooting this, so we don't need to worry about that.
That's true, yeah. And look, if we are rebooting, if we're going straight clean, like...
And his first, I'm going to say this is also his first, official adventure.
Yeah, I mean...
Maybe he's catching some in the first one, but this is the first adventure we're seeing. Like, obviously, the beginning thing is always important. I don't think
he has to necessarily be a teacher, but I do think the thing that makes Indiana Jones endearing is that he's kind of a doofus that falls ass backwards into the, sometimes he wins, but most of the time he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, so that brings us then to the question of what story are we telling? And if we're going to just blank slate this, do you even need Marion Ravenwood? Do you need Salah? You know, we could theoretically invent a supporting cast from scratch that serves our needs. So let's drill down. What do we want our MacGuffin to be? Where do we want to start this journey?
So here's a pitch. If you don't want to completely clean the slate, but you don't necessarily want to do young Indiana Jones, I always thought it was interesting in Raiders of the Lost Ark. They set up Abner Ravenwood, Marion's father, as a very big influence, a very big character of Indiana Jones. And we never follow up on that. So it could be an adventure that takes place before Raiders. It could be Indy's first, real adventure under Abner Ravenwood. And maybe Abner's your kind of like more of your main character. And we get kind of like this probably isn't the best example, but like a Solo type situation where
I see where you're going. I think where also I would even say that it's a little better than Solo because we're seeing him become, maybe it's not an origin story completely, but like maybe at first he's a guy who's just trying to make money or collect them for himself. And then he learns during this process that it's too important for people to learn about this stuff and to know history. And so that's where Ravenwood
So instead
comes
of always having this, because we have
to have a story.
River Phoenix is, when he's a young Indiana Jones, he's already like, this belongs in a museum. But what if it wasn't like that?
Yeah. I definitely think that we should, if we're going to reboot it, let's ignore young Indiana Jones.
I agree.
And let's tell our own. Look, I think there's value in thinking about this the same way that Chris Nolan approached Batman Begins vis-a-vis the Burton Batman.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Because theoretically, you could imagine Batman Begins as happening prior to Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah,
right.
Arguably,
It's not that they're the same world in any way, but like they don't contradict each other explicitly.
Right.
No.
So maybe that's what we should be thinking about doing here. Like, let's tell the Abner Ravenwood first time Indy meets Marion, like early on adventure that doesn't have to look and feel like Raiders, but also doesn't explicitly contradict Raiders.
I think that's 100% valid.
Right.
It's almost like Incredible Hulk too, where it's like maybe it could kind of still be in the same universe, but it's not. But it could be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but I think that dynamic is one of the reasons why I was kind of stuck on like World War I or whatever, because he would have to he'd necessarily have to be that younger. But obviously, if we're going to reboot from the ground up, Abner and them could have been messing around in World War II.
Well, but you could you could also get some World War I action with Abner if he's an older guy and like, Indy's a younger guy. Maybe it's our cold open happens during World War I, or maybe it's just a flashback with Abner.
Well, because I just think it's like one of those things, like we were talking about paying homage to the last movies, and I just think Indy saves the world when he gets these things back.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
When he gets these things back, or when he fails to get these things back, or when they get taken from him and put him in a safe place,
right,
he saves the world. Period.
Yes.
So like if he's involved as a young person in a World War I adventure that saves the world from that war, and then later on, he's like, damn it, the world keeps getting saved by me putting stuff back where it belongs. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like I said, I don't want to be slavish to the thing, but just that rhythm
that
of
important.
Like him being in major conflicts, having a weird adventure that's supposed to be way on the side of the conflict, but ending up solving the conflict in a way that military might can't. The intellect, the sword. I mean, the pen.
And it's more of those like, it's not that finding the Grail or finding the Covenant stopped the war, but it's like had that not happened, then that outcome would be very different.
Well, yeah, it's for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost.
It's very like Men in Black. Like no one's ever going to really know the actual,
impact.
Exactly.
But Spear of Destiny, I think, is a great one.
I think the Spear of Destiny
because
is cool.
Isn't that one supposed to basically make you immortal, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it's like so. The Spear of Destiny traditionally is thought of as the spear that pierced the side of Jesus, and in doing so, it was given this great power. I mean, I think it's a little bit nebulous. It's sort of like Grant Morrison superpowers. It's like it gives you the power to rule the world in some way.
Sure.
Well,
and that's probably better.
Yeah.
Even when you go back and you watch Raiders again, like no one really explicitly knows throughout the entire movie what the Ark can do, but they have tons of metaphors and radio to God. Okay. Sure. Yeah. I don't think you ever have to get too granular with what it does.
How skeptical was Indy in that first movie? I forget.
He was. It's always funny because he acts skeptical until he puts that fedora on, and then it's it's very real because he calls everything bedtime stories in the classroom.
Right.
And I never understood if that was to throw everyone else off so they didn't know what he was doing or.
Well, maybe we get into some of that though. I mean, maybe we make that a little bit more explicit in our version of the story.
And also, I think maybe one thing we could work in, I don't know, just at some point is one of these things that doesn't turn out to be such a great grand adventure. It's just crap. And I just found a bottle. I just found a bag of sand. I thought it was an idol.
That's a funny cold open.
That is a funny cold
but this
Actually,
is trash. You know what I mean?
That just gives me the idea if we do go this route of Indiana Jones
He's a collector.
Is a collector and then ends up, changing his ways. I think it is you play with the fact that he doesn't want anyone else to know what he knows and get any close. And by the end, he's teaching. He's now becoming a teacher and is teaching other people
because he knows how important it is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's nice.
So I was looking up, Raiders of the Lost Ark takes place in 1936. I did not remember that off the top of my head. So we are looking at a time period when really, I mean, you can make the argument the Nazis were coming to power.
Yes.
I mean,
right.
So we're talking about basically the time period between the stock market crash in 1929 and 1934-ish, whenever the first shots were fired for World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting period because that is the rise of fascism in Europe. I mean, that comes right on the heels of the stock market crash. That is when Mussolini's taken over in Italy. That's when the Nazis are rising to power in Germany. It's not a good time to be a Western intellectual.
Oh, that's what I was about to say. Like, maybe Abner gets driven out of some place by the anti-intellectual fascism movement. But on his way out, he's like, dude, but I have this dope thing that I know where it's at, and I've been forced out of this country that has it or something.
Well, to that point, the most current version of the theory goes that Noah's Ark is on a mountain in Turkey.
Yes, I've seen that.
Mount Ararat in Turkey.
Yeah.
Dr. Ravenwood could be coming out of Turkey, which was famously contested. I don't know if the Nazis quite made it that far in the early 30s, but I feel like we don't know enough history to be getting into the specifics of this, but I don't know. There's something to that.
I also think like I was just about to say, and I don't want to give the note like dumb it down, but also like Indiana Jones does a great job of being historical without bogging you down with history.
Yes.
True.
No,
True.
absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. There's just, I guess what I'm looking for is a setting. I'm looking for like, where are we going to be? And what makes it, what about the time period makes that place interesting?
Well, you know what? I think if we do a simple, try to design a tour of the Axis countries as they're coalescing into those powers for World War II. You know what I'm saying? Like that the 30s are when everybody's coalescing, fascism's rising in different fronts, people are being pushed to different ideologies, and all the while those scraps are happening, everybody's preparing for a grand war and everybody's looking for one weapon that will, because nobody knows about the nuclear bomb yet. Nobody knows about the Hiroshima bomb.
I do like the idea though of just, we haven't seen the aesthetic of like China so far in Indiana Jones. There have been novels and some video games, but we've never seen what the action could be like there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Orient in general as different places, because at that time we kind of thought of the Orient as one thing, but like if you were in Japan and had to hop a flight to China, that's a culture shock for your ass that we haven't really seen how culture shocky that would be.
But I mean,
The
even
adventure would
so,
be
it's
different.
like, I think to your point, it's like, now I'm just thinking of like Indiana Jones is more than any other franchise about set pieces. What's a cool set piece? Indiana Jones never fought a samurai. That'd be neat,
Totally.
Yeah. And zealotous samurai who also know that, like, there's all sorts of things that, like, the Code of Hammurabi could be involved or something. Maybe the Code of Hammurabi could tell you part of where the spear is or something. Maybe the interconnectedness of all these cryptid-esque objects through time. Maybe that could be our jam a little bit.
And especially since this is slightly fictional, and just like you said, we're kind of using the history in a sort of like, boo.
Yeah.
Then we can make that stretch of the Code of Hammurabi, giving a clue to this next thing. And
that opens up a whole new thought process for me, is like, from the Middle East, is there something from like the era of Genghis Khan that he's chasing, and that takes him into China, which technically bridges Europe and China, right? Because
for instance, there's a rumor that the reason Genghis Khan was able to conquer as much as he was able to conquer is because he had the Spear of Destiny.
Are you just making that up?
I am making that up.
I bought it. I was like, wait.
I didn't, but I think that's the beauty of Indiana Jones is if you say it with conviction, I'll believe it.
And
So-
you know who else had it? Alexander the Great. And you know who else had it? All these people who like, we're half their DNA right now.
And then we get to go
That's
to
interesting.
Then we get to go to all those places, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Even if but for a short time. Right?
This is starting to coalesce for me. So if the Spear of Destiny was in the Middle East, then of course Alexander the Great was before Jesus. I'm just trying to track this, but like the Spear of Destiny starts in Jerusalem, or I forget exactly where Jesus was crucified. But if it makes its way to many different places, eventually ends up in Rome in the hands of the Vatican, but then they trade it to the Mongols as a way to keep the Mongols out of Europe. And then the Mongols take it to China. And then that becomes a spear of the court of the Chinese emperor. But then when the Japanese invade China, then the emperor of Japan takes it. And so it's like this convoluted route that this thing has taken through all these major events in history.
I can see the little plane flying.
Right, exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
And it gives you a reason to visit all these places. But then it's almost like as the time ticks away that he's chasing the spear, the fascist powers are rising, right? Like we're getting closer and closer to the point where Japan launches an attack on the US, which won't happen in this movie, but I love that as sort of like this simmering undercurrent.
Well, the other thing is, because this is a reboot, I think this is a great thing that we can do. And it's also like the kind of ambiguous canon that we keep talking about, where what if Abner had his top two students and their best friends, Indiana Jones and Belloc. And Belloc, who we know at the start of Raiders, they've already been this tit for tat on a lot of these adventures. They must have been. What if they're sent together to go find this thing, and then it turns halfway through like Belloc has not the same intentions as Indy?
I like that. I mean, I don't know if that makes the world too small. I almost feel like it'd be great in the way that Batman Begins introduced Ra's al Ghul and the Scarecrow and just opened up the rogues a little bit. I mean, I wonder if this is a good opportunity to bring in a new villain. But I also think that bringing back Belloc makes a certain amount of sense. I guess here's maybe a question to take a step back from what we're talking about. Like, obviously, Indiana Jones is special to nerds of our era, but I also feel like Indiana Jones is not cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I wonder, how do you make a 15-year-old want to go see Indiana Jones? I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. How do you make this something other than just something that, you know, a 35-year-old with warm nostalgia is going to want to see?
I think part of it is, and I hate to say this, guys, because of given all the stuff we're going to talk about, but like, I think you lean into either the spy angle or the pushed into like how they make you an asset. You know, in some of these global conflicts, if you're in the right place and you have the right set of knowledge, they make you be on the global frequency, as it were. They make you be the person who, well, you're our expert now, and you're going to do what we say until we choose to let you go. And what if Indiana Jones and Belloc or whatever got into some situation where their knowledge base, they're commandeered, almost like, you know, in the old cop shows, I commandeer your car.
I mean, they kind of did that with the third one, right?
Here's my opinion on that. Why Indiana Jones isn't cool. It was very cool.
Sure.
Then when Crystal Skull came out, it wasn't cool because Harrison Ford is old. He's older. And to ask a 15-year-old to really step into the shoes of someone who's like pushing 70, it just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
I honestly think that as painful as it might be at first, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And I think casting solves a lot the cool factor.
I was going to say the same thing.
Well, maybe that is the thing we should tackle then, because I think from that casting choice, some clearer story decisions maybe could be made.
Sure.
Because to me, this is broad. Like, this question is very broad. This could be anything from like, let's find a 25-year, let's make it Tom Holland, because Ron likes to do that.
Yeah.
Or all the way up to like, a part of me sort of feels like riffing with the Sherlock Holmes of it all, like cast Robert Downey Jr. as Indiana Jones. You know what I mean? And which I know doesn't
but
work.
Then he's too old.
That,
right?
well, theoretically he is, yes.
Or is he not?
But I mean, like, the choice that I had in my mind kind of maybe splits the difference, maybe skewing a little towards yours.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking Chris Pine would make a really good Indiana Jones. He's a little bit more serious, but also think about some of his kind of funnier moments as Kirk in the Star Trek movies, where he can be very serious, but the next scene he can be a little self-deprecating, which I kind of think is what Indiana Jones needs a little bit.
You know, if we were talking about an of age one, I would go with Nathan Fillion, but I don't think we're talking of an in age one.
Well, no, I think the Chris Pine of it all, I kind of like that, because also, again, a lot of these guys aren't very physical. A lot of these actor types are not very physical, and I think Chris Pine can actually handle a lot of the physical stuff, or close-up shots and stuff. And then obviously he's got a great body for stunt doubles to approximate. Yeah,
he seems so pretty to me. He seems like boyish. Yeah. That's the thing that that's always hung me up on Chris Pine.
What about Cumberbatch?
I don't need to see him do a mid-Atlantic American accent. I don't need that commentary from him.
He's not super physical as an actor.
No. And we're looking for someone, we're going to put a little more stunts in this. We're going to make it a little more badass.
It's not even that. It's he needs to have that like American trucker physicality that Harrison Ford has. You know what I mean? It's like look at that guy. It's like he's got rough hands.
Well, yeah, he was sort of a modern Cary Grant or Gregory Peck, right? Like that's Harrison Ford.
Probably more Gregory
the
Peck
one
than
going
Cary
around
Grant.
and there were fan manips, and I actually thought it looked really good was Chris Pratt. Like,
I was going to say Chris Pratt too.
The Chris Pratt one's again, like I could buy it.
If we're doing a younger version of him, does that make sense?
Here's the thing about Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt, he pulls faces, he mugs. And I feel like Indiana Jones is the guy who is just calm and steady kind of throughout crazy nonsense. And it's interesting because we've talked about this on Nerd Goat a little bit, like that it's such a unique energy that Harrison Ford brought to the 80s. It's like he was an old man in a young man's ruggedly good looking body.
Right.
And I don't know if you have a lot of movie stars like that anymore.
I don't, but I think that's where you like, okay, where can we take some of the characteristics that we loved about Indiana Jones, but tailor it to someone new? Because you're right. You're never going to get
obviously
the
Brendan
Harrison.
Fraser.
you're not going to get the Harrison Ford energy. Well, Brendan Fraser got his Indiana Jones
Yes, he
trilogy.
did.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That was almost his character arc in The Mummy was a little bit similar to what we're talking about here.
Right. But I think it's okay if it's not, and I don't think it should be the exact same character that Harrison plays. I think it can have characteristics just like Alden Ehrenreich's Han Solo has enough Han Solo isms, but it's not the same Han Solo.
Well, and also this thing about you said he's the perfect straight man, and you're right, but that's the thing. We see the difference between how he acts at work as a professor, and I think if he's trying to be an adjunct professor or trying to work into Ravenwood's good graces, he's all zipped up and he's very calm, and I'm very smart, and I'm smart for my age and all that kind of jazz. But when the adventure starts, that's where the faces come out, and that's where oh God, my hat, you know what I mean? All that stuff. So I think we get somebody who can play both of those and play the tension between trying to look like a grown up and being the kid that he is on his first grand adventure. I think we get somebody that does that. And I gotta say, of actors that they would accept, I think Pratt's on the older side of that. I think Chris Pine's right in the middle. And I think there's somebody we're not thinking of that's right on the younger cusp. But I don't know who's the exact right flavor. Mark Wahlberg. I'm just joking.
You know what actually brings me back around to the Chris Pine of it all is the movie Hell or High Water.
Yeah, great movie.
He convincingly plays like a hard-bitten working man in that movie in a way that surprised me, frankly.
And the smartest of a dumb breed.
Yeah.
He played that very well. Like if he's like, obviously in this continuity, his dad is a super genius, but that's the thing. He's chosen a life. That's one thing we need to also look at with Indiana Jones. He was built almost to be an effete intellectual who understands the book learning of it all and leaves the rest of it to other people. His dad got in trouble. The one or maybe second or third time he went and got into crap, as it were, he got busted and got caught by the Nazis and everything went wrong.
Right.
Indiana Jones is the action advancement of his dad's character. The intellectual can go into the crap, as it were, and beat up some guys and get the Covenant back. You know?
I would think for our movie, if we do want to go the Abner Ravenwood, I almost don't even want to get into Indy's dad in this film.
Yeah, not at all.
I don't think so.
But I do think Chris Pine, like again, like I think of some of those very serious moments that he has in Hell or High Water, and then some of the goofier moments that he has, like in Star Trek when he's running away from that big snow monster, just like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
you know,
Exactly. And Harrison Ford does similar code switching from, look, I've got this big boulder.
And I never see Chris Pine like as jacked as like a Chris Hemsworth, but he's certainly not like a me, you know?
I actually think Chris Pine. I'm turning on to the Chris Pine. I think I'm picking Idris Elba for Abner.
For Abner, interesting.
Yeah, they let him adopt a little white girl in the continuity, or we're going to swap her. Ravenwood is his daughter, the main chick, and the freaking.
But you know what?
But that doesn't matter. Make it.
It's 1937. It super does matter. Like sincerely, it super matters.
Oh yeah, you're right. It does matter.
I'm not trying to be a dig about it, but it super matters.
I'll allow it.
I'm glad you were the arbiter of racial justice in 1937, Ron. So yeah, just thinking about that, how to work that out. But like, hey, not thinking beyond the box. That's cool.
Honestly, whoever you choose is Indiana Jones. I don't think there's ever going to be like, yep, that's it. I think you go with your guy and then you work around their strength.
You obviously go with the guy who played Han Solo.
Alden Ehrenreich. Alden Ehrenreich makes an entire career out of just taking over for Indiana or for Harrison.
He's in Air Force 2.
Coming on season 2 of Rebooted.
That's gonna be our next Rebooted for sure. Yeah,
could get a lot of mileage out of that one. All right, so if we're gonna just say Chris Pine for now, without getting too deep into it,
if something else comes up, great.
Then it becomes, all right, what's the story you're telling around Chris Pine that makes it a movie that gets butts in seats? That's the thing that I want to do here is like, how do you take an old-fashioned concept literally set in an old-fashioned time period, told in an old-fashioned pulpy way? How do you make that cool? How do you make a 16-year-old who's been raised on Marvel movies show up for that? I think it's a tough question.
It is a tough question. And I wonder if you roll the dice on, will a 16-year-old accept back to basics filmmaking? Like, do we put like a kind of not a soft ban on CGI? Do you do it Lord of the Rings?
I was going to say
I'd
say one of the keys to this is maybe keeping the budget low.
Yeah, like let's go even further. What if you hire like the Safdie brothers to direct this? What if you hire like a real independent, like an A24 level indie director to direct this movie, and you give them $50 million, enough to travel around the world, but it's a tight, scrappy budget.
Dude, Eggers, the guy who did The Witch.
Yeah, who also just did The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
Same guy, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
There's something interesting to that, and then it becomes like,
And he's a genius. Just one last thing.
Yeah,
He's
go.
a genius at the verisimilitude of being in a time.
yes.
The Witch, you are in those times.
And
And
not-
Lighthouse, you're in that time.
And I want to say not only that, like he shoots it in a way that's anti-Spielbergian, right?
Boom.
Like it's because that's the other thing to me is Steven Spielberg's aesthetic is so signature at this point. I'd almost want to go in a completely different direction because you don't want to get somebody who's doing a Spielberg impression.
Yeah.
I don't think that
Right.
makes an interesting movie.
You don't
I
want to get
agree.
Ron Howard?
I would almost hear me out. This is a little bit more on the business side, but I think it could dictate how the movie is made. Indiana Jones now is a Disney property, which I feel like we've all forgotten.
That's true.
I would almost position this as the first big marquee Disney Plus movie. And I think you give it a Disney Plus budget and you make it a huge event for Disney Plus because you're like, how are the 16-year-olds going to think it's cool? You throw it on the streaming service that they're watching.
I'm sold. I
Yeah.
am sold with that
Absolutely.
idea.
And there's way
Absolutely.
bigger stunts than you would generally. That's Disney Plus's whole thing. These are way bigger stunts and set pieces you've ever seen on your phone,
it's
buddy.
TV Plus.
Right, yeah.
TV Plus.
Seeing what
absolutely.
they've done with The Mandalorian, even while a
Yes.
Star Wars sequel trilogy is in theaters, but seeing how they're recontextualizing Star Wars for their streaming service, I think that's the shot in the arm that Indiana Jones is desperately needs.
Agreed. Absolutely.
No, I buy that. Okay.
And with Chris Pine leading it, that actually does work.
Yeah, you get Chris Pine. Okay, now we got to cast who's Marion. I feel like you got to get a really good, strong,
and this
romantic
is-
lead.
Right.
And this is the real jazz. We gotta shore up that George Lucas weird stuff. You know what I'm talking about? The Ravenwood's ages and different stuff
Yes,
are all
yes,
super
yes.
weird. And this is our chance just to go ahead and wipe that away, Disneyfy it as it were.
Sure.
So let's make them concurrent ages. And the betrayal is you got with my daughter who is your age, and it is appropriate for you to get together, but it is still a betrayal because I am a man in the 30s and this is my property daughter. And we could challenge some of that crap. You know what I mean? No, for real. To have her
It's
have
true.
Yeah.
a key part in this young adventure rather than being an accoutrement to his later adventure and helping him out in adventure. No. In one of his seminal adventures, she was right there along with him, learning the same things and the same action that he learned.
Well, look, I
love
think
it.
I think an amazing actress for that, even though I don't know if she's too old, which I'm very Hollywood when I say this, Emily Blunt
Ooh.
as a new Marion.
I mean, I like it, but yeah, I think you're right that she's mothering age, and we're kind of looking at somebody who's, if Harrison Ford was X age in the 30s, and not that we have to adhere to that, but a little bit earlier in the 30s, he's like 30 maybe, coming up against it. You know, I don't know. How old are we doing? How are we deciding?
I would love to kind of keep it fluid, you know,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
here's
'cause
one.
Chris Pine is close to 40, guys.
He is, but also, you know,
He could play 20.
exactly.
He could play 30.
Keeping this almost in the Disney family, I would pitch Elizabeth Olsen for Marion Ravenwood. I think that she can handle the action. She's got a toughness about her. She's got way more charisma in the last few Marvel movies. You can see it start to come out of her more and more. I could definitely, my brain can make the A to C from her to.
She also has experience, like she was an indie darling before she was in those Marvel movies.
Right.
So she has experience working with directors and aesthetics on that indie level that I think could be very valuable if we're going to go that route with this movie or this Disney
I
Plus.
love that we're going to
movie.
make an indie.
Indie's got to go indie. I like it.
Indie Square.
I think whoever you pick, they have to have a toughness about them, very tough. And I
Elizabeth
think,
Olsen,
I think
I
she's
second
got
that
I
one,
think she's got a
personally.
toughness to her.
yeah, she does.
And then, so what about Marion's father? What about Abner
Ravenwood.
Abner Ravenwood.
Hmm.
I mean, my mind immediately goes just because I think I think he literally played this role in the original National Treasure movie. But if you need a knowledgeable sage archaeologist, Christopher Plummer is where my mind.
So you're going real old.
He's too old. Yeah,
No.
but that's just a starting point for
You know
discussion.
what? I want to go back to something Ron said. What if we do Nate Fillion playing his actual age and maybe a little bit up? You know what I'm saying? Because it seems like the sort of person that would impact upon a young indie. Like, this is what a suave older dude who
And
doesn't
he
necessarily.
is cool.
He is cool. He's reasonably cool.
You know, the first thought that popped into my mind was thinking of Mark Hamill and Kingsman, something like
So Mark Hamill?
yeah. But like kind of how he looked.
Yes.
Yeah, but as like the professor-y type. Because I
Yeah.
think
But a little bit tougher
I think
looking.
the point of Abner is that he's too old or too whatever to go on the adventure, but I think he looms large over it.
Right. Oh, and also it's just as a character beat, Indy is proving to Ravenwood, I'm not just a thug. I'm not just your hired guy to take care of your stuff. I am smart. Obviously, he's smart because he's part of the internship. But you know what I mean? I'm on your level.
What if you flip it, though? What if you flip it? He's trying to prove to Abner that he is smart.
Oh,
Or
that's
excuse me, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go the other way.
Yeah.
That he's tough. What if you play him a little bit Clark Kent? Like, you play him as like an effete New York liberal at an Ivy League college. And he's like, no, man, like, I can get out. He's got to prove his toughness.
Huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you don't
And
have to hire a dummy.
Then
you
I
can
would
hire
vote
me.
for Nathan Fillion, actually, in that case.
It would be kind of interesting if his mentor is the rugged one. And he doesn't even need to be the rugged one, like going out into the field with him, but it's almost a guy has too many hard years behind him because he's been doing so much field
Well, I don't know
work.
if he's still canceled or not, but what about someone like a Liam Neeson? Someone who you can believe had a lifetime of like rugged adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I see that genre of person. And you know who else I could see on some, oh my gosh.
Do it.
Maybe this is a good person to be the daddy of Emily Blunt or whoever you guys were talking about.
Elizabeth Olsen.
Dude. Especially looking at their eyes. Daniel Craig.
Oh, wow.
I love
And then
Daniel
you continue the tradition
You know?
of a Bond
Yes,
being the
a
mentor
Bond being
figure.
the dad. Oh,
Right?
I also like Daniel Craig is one of the most underrated character actors.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because
When you see Knives Out,
Oh.
you'll see that
can't wait to
guy.
see that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what was that Soderbergh movie with Adam Driver and Channing Tatum?
Lucky
Logan.
Logan
Yeah.
Lucky. Again, Daniel Craig playing just the weirdest role in that movie, commits 110% and is just a delight.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think if you give him a quirkiness and make him an older guy, put
Yeah.
him in some like, college professor spectacles, but also play into just like the ruggedness of it.
Dude, I can't see. He takes the spectacles off and busts off his shirt and he's going to fight a pirate. And you're like, look at Ravenwood.
I believe,
Damn.
yeah, I would believe he's been on all these adventures that Indy now is about to embark on himself.
Yes.
Right. And he's just now embracing the fact that he's getting a little bit too old for this stuff. And he's going to bring in a new guy. But who's going to be the new guy? Our guy's trying to prove that he can be the new guy.
Or Belloc potential.
Yeah,
Ooh,
I mean,
yes.
They're rivals.
They're rivals for the love of Ravenwood.
I mean, yeah, you could even give him a couple antagonists. It's like it's a class of guys, right?
Right.
It's like it's his whole. I don't know what they call it, like the group of graduate students that are all
and the
in
other-
that class.
I mean, the Skull and Bones.
Well, maybe.
I'm joking.
Well, no.
100%.
Honestly, some of these guys, but like the Kingsman thing of like the class
Yeah.
that is all going after
Yeah.
something. It's like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I think you can pull a Baron Modo or whatever from Doctor Strange,
Baron
where
Mordo,
that
yeah.
whole movie, you think that, oh, this guy's just another one of the good guys. And then at the end, you realize like, oh, that's actually going to be the villain.
And by the way, that is how our simmering fascism hits at the end. Is like he was a Nazi the whole time.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, and Belloc honestly is one of those. There's good people on both sides. Republicans buy Air Jordans
Sure.
too. That crap. He's on that. He's like, look, man, you're going to get killed sticking to principle, and I'm going to make a mint with no principles. Who's winning? Look at the scoreboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm alive with a bunch of Nazi gold. You're dead. come on.
I don't know if it's too typecast or even if like that the age difference would work, but I could totally see like a Henry Cavill being like Belloc.
Oh,
Was Belloc a white guy? I always thought he was like slightly, he was
I don't
Arabian
know.
or Middle Eastern.
I don't know what he was.
Okay.
It was played by a white actor.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it,
Well, he
it
had
was,
kind
it
of
was
the-
played by Ivan Ooze from the Power Rangers movie.
Well, you know what? And he had, what he had a little bit of that Afrikaner. You know what I'm saying? Those white
he's
South
a
African type
he's like a
people.
colonialist.
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. So he's got some weird indeterminate accent. That's a spice, a little bit of spice of Africa, a little bit of spice of Deutschland.
I was actually going to suggest Oscar Isaac as
Ooh,
Belloc.
that's actually a really good choice.
that's-
too.
that's kinda
and
nice.
you keep it in the Disney family.
Well, and so that my third choice was then going to be Pedro Pascal, who's currently in The Mandalorian.
Another.
And can do a very, I mean, he is British and his actual voice is like silky smooth British accent. So I don't know.
No, I think those work. I think that genre of actor where it's like
Yeah.
they could be seen,
Ethnically ambiguous.
I feel
Yeah.
like Oscar Isaac is the perfect choice for that.
Yeah.
He's literally my choice and your choice right in the middle. He's a little bit Cavill, a little bit Pascal.
Yeah.
Put them together and you got an Oscar stew.
Yeah,
I like
yeah, absolutely. So let's do that. So Oscar Isaac versus Chris Pine, then the for the love of Daniel Craig.
By the way, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to bringing in like Henry Cavill as one of the other graduate students.
yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
It sort of becomes like an It's a Mad World type of thing with all these different guys going after
Ooh,
this thing.
and-
Now,
see-
here's a question though.
Mhm.
Ron being a producer for a second.
Please.
How expensive are all of those guys going to be?
So here's the double-edged sword of these new streaming deals is, you might have to pay upfront a lot of money for these guys, but a lot of times these are buyout contracts now. It's like, hey, I'm going to pay you $20 million to be in this thing, but you're not going to get a check 20 years from now if this keeps playing.
No
So-
royalties, no
Right.
residuals.
So
like,
really,
yeah.
if we look at it, Disney Plus, as of this recording, it had 10 million signups in the first day. I think we
think
can
we don't
afford
even
it.
worry about that.
That's
Yeah.
literally $70 million day one that renews every month.
Right.
That's the crazy thing.
Right.
Right. So and I think the budget we should shoot for is between 80 and 120. I think that's good. That's a nice range. Anything up, yeah.
It's the Shazam budget.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
And
it's
also,
enough to do something.
I think if you start to get into like, these kind of Ocean's 11 type deals where I think people would just want to be a part of this thing,
Yeah.
to be a part of the legacy. Like how many actors have now shown up in these Star Wars sequels just because they just want to be a part of it?
Yeah.
I think
Shit,
you
Daniel
could-
Craig played a
Stormtrooper. Yeah. Simon
Laura
Pegg.
Dern
Right.
played a person who
So
made everybody angry.
I do think that this would be one of those things where I'm not saying it would be cheap out, but I definitely don't think you're going to have
wouldn't be
to
as
shell out their top ask for this movie.
I would agree with that, especially if you're bringing people in on walk-on roles that it's like, all right, we're now in Mombasa and Idris Elba is going to show up for a scene or two.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's sort of like Salah in the original in Raiders, where it's
Right.
like he's like the on-site guy wherever
Right.
they might be. You're not going to have to pay that guy $15 million to be there.
Yeah.
You know,
and
you
I think
can-
that was one of the smartest things Indiana Jones did was like having Sala when they get there. Like Indy has these friends all over the world, and that's where you can get your kind of like Batman 66 celebrity cameo in there
Totally.
if you want
Right.
to.
And
and also since we're doing this where he's going sort of on his first adventure, they're actually Ravenwood's friends.
Right.
And Indy's the coolest of all of these people. So what really wins over all of the friends that he's going to have in the future is that he's just the best person to talk to in these scenarios.
or he's the worst, but he proves himself in other ways.
Either way,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like that.
Yeah.
To me, that's sort of an interesting through line. If we're going to do this in that episodic George Lucas, Steven Spielberg style, that's like, all right, he's going to ping pong from place to place. It's almost like The Amazing Race, right?
Right.
It's almost like that game show, The Amazing Race. He is the most disadvantaged, like physically. Everybody thinks he's like the most effete, do nothing type of guy.
Right, because we got Cavill being a musclehead from like England, so he's like, good old fashioned put him up, like old fashioned boxer type.
Oscar Isaac could almost mentor him as like the Belloc who's going to do the heel turn to be more smooth talking
Yep.
and like, this is how you charm people. This is how you use what you have.
seduce your way in. Yeah.
I almost
Yeah.
feel like now we just need to add like one or two other guys in that class
that have like a characteristic
Yeah.
that Indy will have later. whatever. Because Indy can punch, but not very well. So it'd be great if
Right.
like Henry Cavill's he's trying to mimic what is the guy that he saw 10 years earlier. You know?
I mean, I don't know if this is too on the nose, but it's like you could have one guy who's like a sharpshooter, shoots from the hip.
Right.
You could have another guy who works with a whip. You know what I mean? It's almost like all these guys that he was out competing against, he had to take a piece from what they each did to become the Indy we know.
I really like that a lot.
I think that's really cool, and I think it's one of those things where I think people would love to see that scene of him learning all the stuff from It 3, but just a little bit more, decompressed storytelling.
Totally. And I mean, that's also, again, just another great example or another great way to just pack this full of that talent that's going to have some currency with your viewers, right? And that's the thing that I think I was looking for when I took us down this road of like, how do you make it cool? I guess it's not so much cool. It's just how do you make people interested in watching it? And if you're telling me that it's going to be like Chris Pine, Oscar Isaac, Henry Cavill, three-hander, whatever, like all competing against each other on a run, on a madcap worldwide adventure, I'm already partly sold. Then you throw in Elizabeth Olsen as like she's the one who's, it's almost like she's the one who's helping Indy even keep up with these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
She's actually good at it.
right. Or at
Because
least she's like, she has it all together in a way that he doesn't. She's
but
smart.
yes.
She's capable. She has the relationships. I mean, she can introduce him to a lot of these people. Sorry.
Right. No. And she has the secret prodigy angle of it too, though, because for the women of her time, she would have to suppress.
Oh, yes.
She would have to suppress her natural inclination to beat guys up, shimmy through the chimneys, whatever the hell she does, drink like a sailor, all that stuff. She'd have to suppress all that. So she'd almost have the dual identity that Indy ends up adopting later, that effete person in the streets and superhero in the sheets. You know what I mean? that thing. So like he learned something from her as well as all the rest of these guys, and all of it conglomerates to be the Indiana Jones persona. And then what to go?
But I do have one thing, and that's that he has to learn something on his own. He can't just be a conglomerate of all these people, right? We got to have something. And I say it just happens to be that he's good at something. I don't know what.
Wait, so you just said he needs to learn something, but you don't want him to actually learn it. He just happens to be good at it?
Or like he has to get better at it, but he's like got a little bit of a more natural feel to that thing. Maybe the whip, something where it's just like so that at least he's learning something he's not just taking from everybody that he's around that way. He's doing something that's like originally his own thing.
Well, what I think he needs to learn is to believe in some of this stuff, right?
Okay.
I think that's why I asked
Okay.
that. I asked that question early on, like how skeptical did they play him? Because I feel like that's a really good arc. If he's the one who's like, I mean, he's basically Han Solo in Star Wars, right? Like the Force is BS, like hokey old religion. But then he sees the thing that turns him and is like, oh, like not only is this real, but like this scares me. It needs to be in a museum. You know what I mean?
I think
like,
there has
that's
to
the
be
thing.
there has to be a humbling where it's not about the fortune and glory. It then he turns from essentially pirate to preservation.
And again, going with the pirate thing, I know we didn't want to see his dad, but if we position him as being from a family that again is sort of like effete East Coast liberal type family, and they themselves have a collection, right? And like the Henry Jones Sr. collection is on display at the Guggenheim or whatever. I don't know if the Guggenheim was even built in 34, but you know what I mean? So like that could be a piece of him that he sort of learned from his family growing up, is like these things are valuable only in so much as they bring fortune and glory to our family. And he has to make that turn throughout the course of the movie.
That's how I like it.
Yeah, like this is something of real power that's of value to humanity, and you have to use it wisely and treat it with respect. I don't know.
Yeah. I see something along the lines of Balak getting the spear and it having power of some type that he starts to use. And then he gets the spear with the whip the first time that he actually makes it work. Like that's
okay.
That's like a moment where like he's been trying to get the whip to do things and he keeps f***ing up. Excuse my language. He keeps messing up. And then that's the one where he actually gets it to wrap around and gets it out of his hands. Maybe. I don't know. It's just an idea that popped into my head.
Well, I mean, I really like the idea of Belloc. That could be an interesting turning point for Belloc, where he gets a taste of power.
Yeah.
And it's corrupting.
I think so too. I think
Yeah.
Belloc, you almost play him as if you had never seen anything else, like, oh, this is going to be like Indy's sidekick and he'll be like the other good hero. And it's the minute he gets his hands on the spear, it's almost like the One Ring, you know?
What if you set it up so that you're almost afraid the whole movie that, again, if you don't know the original Indiana Jones movies, that Belloc is going to die.
Right.
Oh, I mean, here's something you could do. He's not named Belloc. Belloc is like a nom de guerre that he takes on at the end of this movie. You know what I mean? So you can actually play him as being a good friend to Indy, and the fear throughout the entire movie is that this guy's going to die, and that's going to turn Indy cold or like make him hard bitten. But it turns out that guy becomes Belloc.
Right.
He gets that taste of power. It corrupts him. And from that, he takes on the name Belloc for whatever reason.
No, I would love it if like Belloc was like a story that gets told to all these, and it's almost like a cautionary tale.
Yeah, it's
and
like the name of a demon.
Now I
right,
see where
and
you're
then he
going.
adopts
Okay.
it himself.
Well, yeah, it's
at the
almost
end.
like a name for like the Gollum type person who gets too
yeah.
keyed
Right.
into antiquities and too avaricious, and it turns him into a Wendigo or something. And he's like, "Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I grab up the stuff and I have it in my hole. I'm the Grendel, baby, or whatever."
I always thought it was weird in the Indiana Jones movies that he was just like he had the one name.
yeah,
like
he's not
Madonna.
like, he's like Seal.
Right, exactly. I always thought that was kind of strange.
Kiss from a rose.
I think that's really cool. If Belloc is somehow from the beginning, yeah, it could even be rooted in some like fantastical historical thing where like that is. I like the idea of a demon actually, and it's like taking on that persona, owning the Darth Vader of it.
Yeah.
To go on for the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, I think that could be really. Whoa.
Oh, dude,
no.
this guy.
Oh,
We were so close.
I thought we were done.
Boys, I had a late lunch. It's good to see you down here in your corner office working so hard. I just got back. I had a lunch with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He's a good friend. Jeffrey tells me the hottest thing this season, is that catchphrase, "Okay, Boomer." Okay, Boomer. I want Indiana Jones to say "Okay, Boomer" to people throughout this movie. The kids are gonna love it. You know I had it. I had an inkling that the kids wouldn't like this movie. This solves it. Okay, boys, have a good day.
Well, that's a real problem because the baby boom won't happen for quite a while until after this is over.
I do have an idea though.
Boomer literally has no meaning in this context.
We can fool this guy. This is what we do. Henry Cavill's character is named Boomer.
Oh, great. I love it. And then it becomes Belloc at the end.
Amazing. And so
Yeah.
he just sarcastically throughout the whole movie is like, okay, Boomer.
yeah. There's like Boomer Easton or something.
The
He's
kids
like,
will get it. The parents won't. Perfect, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, Boomer is a really good name for like an East Coast dude in the 1930s.
Right.
You
yeah.
totally would call that
Scooter,
guy Boomer.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, sometimes I'm useful.
We got it. Good
You got the boss off our backs.
Yeah, good one, Ron.
All right, guys. So we basically have this thing wrapped up. We've got a young Chris Pine type. I don't know if we're sold on Chris Pine, but playing Indiana Jones. It's going to be taking place on or near 1933, 34, before the first one, obliquely a prequel in the same way that Batman Begins could be thought of as a prequel to Batman 89. We have got a hell of a cast in a Disney Plus movie with a mid-range budget and a verite indie director. We've got Elizabeth Olsen playing a young Marion Ravenwood. We've got Daniel Craig in full character actor mode playing the older Abner Ravenwood. We've got a cast of graduate students around our young Indy who are all trying to take his spotlight, including Oscar Isaac as the proto-Belloc, who isn't called Belloc. We've got Henry Cavill as like the two-fisted ruffian. We've got one or two other guys, maybe a whip user, maybe not. They're going after the Spear of Destiny, and they're tracing a path that takes them from the Holy Land to Rome, to the plains of Mongolia, to the palaces of China, and potentially even to Japan.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, we know that Oscar Isaac's proto-Belloc is going to touch the spear. It will turn him evil. He will take on the name Belloc, which was a cautionary tale told throughout the movie. And Henry Cavill's name is going to be Boomer.
I mean, dude, These are movies, Jack.
That is a movie. Let me ask this. Who is the director? I know we threw Robert Eggers around early on, but let's really nail down what's the aesthetic of the movie?
I think this is one of those where you trust N. Eggers with just that little bit more money because again he did Salem Times, but he just kept it. I just no Joe Johnston. I don't want that glossy pseudo Spielberg thing. Right. But one thing I don't want also, not to be negative, but dude, whoever did the cinematography for Solo is just dude, come on, man. You're not Conrad Hall. That was lit by candlelight. That was like Barry Lyndon looking at that movie. I would like to be just that tiny bit more bright, not modern looking at all. But just a tiny bit more saturated than that.
Yeah, I think if you get like a Matthew Libatek shooting the at least as your cinematographer,
right?
It's shot really well. But I do think that there has to be a quasi vintage look to it. I think depending on cost, maybe you do shoot it on film.
Shoot it on 35.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I want to say is that The Witch. And I have not seen The Lighthouse, but it is the slowest moving movie I've ever seen in my whole life.
Well, you, my friend, have never seen Nicholas Winding Refn movies.
That's true, I haven't. But I just want to make sure that this is decently fast paced. I mean, I understand that there's going to be a movement to it that is not super fast paced, but it is still an action movie, right?
It is still, it has to be an action movie. I mean, I think that's the thing aesthetically. We need to find a balance between sort of that very contemplative, close-up, intimate indie filmmaking style, and somebody who could still go wide for action.
Okay, you know what? Okay, if we're not doing the verisimilitude of the period in Eggers, because maybe Ron's right. Maybe this guy would slow it down. We're going to have Ron Howard come in and save it. If this guy... Do we think that this is a project for Chad Stahelski? I know we put him in the Batman episode for a second, but we also moved off of him because that Batman's not just about action. It's about a lot of meditative stuff. But I think you're talking about somebody who can sell lore. John Wick sells more lore in 10 minutes than a lot of movies do. And it has a respect for antiquity. You see in number 3, John Wick has a respect for antiquity, and those movies move. Even though they have contemplative moments and monologues to set up character, they still move. I don't know.
I don't know if it would be too explosive given everything that just happened, but I do really think that Rian Johnson would be a great choice too. He can play with the lore. He can keep it moving. Also something like Knives Out where he can handle a huge cast and make every member shine. I don't know if the minute you put his name on it, it immediately invalidates the project to a certain segment, but I do think that that's the kind of style you need. He came from that, Brick and Looper, these kind of big concepts in these small packages. Same with Knives Out. He can still do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like him as a choice too.
I like that too. So the other part of me though wants to push it even more indie because Rian Johnson at this point has done Last Jedi. He gets big budget studio movie making.
Right.
And I know that this didn't work out too well with Godzilla, but Gareth Edwards. That's the name. Gareth Edwards would be an interesting choice to me. I still love the aesthetic of Monsters, which was a movie that was made for $15,000 about people fleeing across Mexico to escape a monster invasion.
Well, I mean, and the one thing I'll say to that is I'd say then we go Filioni or Rick Fuyama or whatever the hell, these people who can do something that's fast and still contemplative, because that's the thing. I just if we're gonna say Eggers is a little too contemplative, since
we moved forward in not keeping it at a 50 million budget and we moved up to a 80-120,
what about this? Because he has proven himself, especially on a Disney Plus project. What about Jon Favreau?
That might be the solution.
That is the solution.
I think that's the solution. But
can you imagine how happy Jon Favreau would be to be able to do Indiana Jones?
He clearly has a reverent love for this kind of Star Wars, Lucasfilm stuff, and he treats it in a very sophisticated way, but also a way that we feel like he's playing, which is essentially what we want. We want someone to take Indiana Jones and play with it because it hasn't been played with in so long. So Jon Favreau might be the right choice.
And it's in the Disney family.
It's in the family, baby.
I think you did it.
Interesting.
The Mouse Gang wins again.
Well, guys, I think we did it yet again. We have a reboot.
Yep.
We have achieved reboot. Well, if you guys like what you saw, and we know you do, you have to hit the subscribe button. We are coming back. We are doing more of these. We are rebooting all of your favorite franchises, whether you like it or not. For Billy Business, Ed Greer, Ron Swallow, I am producer Bill. Come back and see us next time.